I need to hear the story of what happened when you were in medical school, taking your exams, and then what happened? You decided to go down to pharmacy. So there's a good story.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I just realized I didn't want to be in medicine, unfortunately. I think that it's a sad story. I think that the world of medicine that I knew existed was sort of treating sick care. I was working at the University of Kentucky where we were, seeing patients who were maybe seeing physicians for the first time in 10 years, people who were really only coming to the hospital because they absolutely needed it as an emergency. And it was pretty sad for me. I felt like I was just sort of managing care. I was, sort of just checking off a list. And if I had known this world of preventative medicine existed, this market where people are trying to optimize themselves rather than trying to just wait for disease to occur, I think I would have certainly stayed with it. But I had no idea at the time that really existed. And so, the pharmacy. A lot of my background in undergrad had been in peptide and protein biosynthesis. So doing recombinant chemistry, like growing up particular peptides or proteins and E. coli, expressing them, purifying them, doing things like X-ray crystallography, as well as solid phase synthesis for shorter chain amino acid proteins or peptides. And so I had some experience in that. And whenever I was considering this pharmacy, just sort of lucked into it. We knew we wanted to do some really innovative peptides that weren't widely available here. And we started launching a lot of products which people weren't really familiar with. So we had to do a little bit of education to the market. We tried to sort of teach physicians about all of these different products, and then we just really hit a niche. I think a lot of physicians and patients saw some of the really positive benefits of some of these therapies, and it really just grew from there.
Yeah. Well, when I was in medical school, no one told me about peptides, but it was going on, right? So the Russians had been developing them since 1980s. How come you knew about it and I didn't know anything about it?
So I hate to say it, but I was never taught about it either. And even with the things I do today with epigenetics, I think I had one day on epigenetics as an undergrad. And so a lot of these topics I was never necessarily taught, but always had an eye for sport and biochemistry. And athletes, particularly even the Russian athletes, have been using a lot of these products for performance-related benefits for a long time. And so they had been out there, not frequently well described or even widely used, but was always sort of an interest of mine.
In medical school, you heard about these athletes using these peptides?
Yeah, well, essentially, I was sort of, doing this peptide research and looking for peptides to be interesting to make or create. And as I was looking for it, I was sort of, I guess, drawn or attracted to some of that performance enhancing aspect of it. And so that's when I started to become a little bit more familiarized with it. And then, it really just grew from there.
Okay, so this is around 2010, right? Is around 2010, and a lot of athletes were already using performance enhancing peptides.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the growth hormone secretagogue receptors and growth hormone releasing hormone peptides are probably one of the best examples. Those have been really used even since as early as 1996 in athletes, trying to do some performance enhancing related administration. So yes, and the field has only gotten much more advanced as this sort of expansion of peptides has occurred, and that is going now at a very wide rate, with more peptides approved than any other type of class of drug molecule.
I see. Yeah, I have a lot of questions about that. Just where do you think the FDA is at with peptides, and what's Big Pharma's attitude when it comes to peptides?
Yeah, well, so I think that our definition in this space of peptides has been a little bit obscured because the FDA and Big Pharma wouldn't necessarily have the same definition. For them, a drug is a drug, whether or not it's a small molecule drug or it's a biologic drug or if it's a peptide-based drug. And so generally, though, the Big Pharma world and even the FDA hasn't seen a lot of peptides. And the rationale for that is because small molecule drugs, which are more stable and more bioavailable, those drugs have always been pushed to market first by a lot of these big companies. So I always mention like Viagra as a good example, right? Viagra is a small molecule drug that readily absorbs. It can be taken orally. It's really easy, and pharma companies have known this, and so it has a great market impact. Vice versa, peptides have always had a little bit of a few weaknesses. One is certainly bioavailability. Most of them are not going to survive the transit through the stomach acid. So generally, they have to be injected. That makes them a little bit less advantageous for wide market rollout. In addition to that, oftentimes they have very, very short half-lives, so they don't stay around in the blood that long. And that means you might have to do frequent injections. And so that has made them really, I would say, big pharma and other companies sort of stay away from them. Because they have a little bit too, they're too hard to package or to control in a product that is very easy to distribute across the world. And so this has really been why small molecule drugs have really taken the focus for several decades. But now we're starting to see the shift. And the reason being is that all those weaknesses that we thought peptides had are now being corrected, and we're left only with the peptide strengths. And those things like, being metabolized very, very predictably, not having a lot of drug-to-drug interactions, having a lot of specificity for individual targets. And so all those problems are now fixed, which now makes peptides very exciting. And now one of a huge area of focus for big pharma and the FDA. And so we're starting to see that peptide approvals are becoming a lot more frequent. Unfortunately, a lot of peptides are really great products, but are in this sort of area of limbo where they're not being developed, but they still have really useful potential in the market. And so that's where compounding pharmacies really stepped in to be able to produce some of those products that were not technically FDA approved, but still had a lot of great clinical application.